Thank you, gentlemen. Ron's going to moderate this panel. We got Art, Ralph, Wayne, Frank, and Jim. All of them write new pulp fiction. They're going to tell you all about the fun of writing new pulp fiction. I know past years people have really enjoyed this panel. At the end of this panel, I will be coming back because I'm very busy. Audiobook of Skull Island by Will Murray. It will be given to one of you out there based on a random drawing we did. Okay?
Are we on the one?
Yep.
Well, Mike, let's get something of it.
Wait. Mike comes back with all those things. Everybody else happy.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Okay, hey, let's get the ball rolling here, all right? And as I always do, but I do it formally. I didn't want to do that this year because what's happened in the past is, in the past, panels of new pulp fiction, we've always tried to get, some relevant theme. I think the first one we did was new pulp compared to old pulp. What was the difference and whatever. And then we moved on. We came to this venue. We got into some heavy themes like sexism in pulps, all right, in the old pulps, and how we're dealing with that today. Last year we dealt with racism. And it was a great panel, and we covered a lot of territory. So this year, when Mike got a hold of me and said, well, okay, getting ready to do PulpFest this year, and hopefully you're going to come back and lead the new pulp fiction panel. And so it's like, yay, you're happy, but at the same time, what's our topic? What are we going to do, right? And I'm thinking, well, we're missing something here, right? Because as much as it's fun to do the weighty topics, we have a ball doing this stuff. It's fun. Yet we come up here and get in front of you people and talk about these big, somber, serious social issues, okay? I've been running Airship 27 Productions now going on 9 years. And one of my rules of thumb is whenever new writers come to me and want to work with us, and I give them the submission guidelines and the formats and whatever, but I always end my direction to them by saying this very simple little rule that I live by, all right, and that's please have fun while you're writing what you're writing. Because if you don't have fun writing it, how the hell do you expect to have anybody read it and have fun? All right? Those things translate. It's what creators do when they have fun with. Now, that being the case, I usually have this documented sheet where I give these guys names and biographies. I'm going to let them do that this year. All right? And we're just going to start with basically introduce yourself and what you do in pulp fiction, and we'll just move along down the line. All right?
Yeah, I'm Art Sippo. I'm a physician. I work in emergency rooms or in care centers, and I'm a co-host of the Book Cave, which has been a long-standing podcast, which is mostly the pulp fiction stuff. We're going to actually, the Pulp Cave is going to wind down now. My partner, Rick Croxton, is not going to be able to continue it, and I'm planning to continue doing some arts reviews afterwards. So we'll
that's great.
Yeah, so we'll still be talking to people. My background is I spent 12 years in the Army as an aerospace medicine specialist, and did 10 years of occupational medicine, and last 10, actually the last 14 years I've been doing emergency medicine. And it all started for me with finding Doc Savage, and that got me into the pulps, and I never got out of it after that.
Okay, thank you, Art, and as always, thank you for your service, really. Ralph, okay, who is Ralph Angelo and what do you do?
Hello, everybody. I'm Ralph Angelo. That answers that question. What I do is I'm a writer. Other than that, I was a self-employed appliance repair technician for years. Hurt my back recently. Now I'm just strictly a writer at this point. I'm an avid guitar player, motorcyclist, skier, all those things. I write fantasy, pulp fiction, basically high-octane stuff, lots of action, explosive conditions, etc. Stuff that grabs the attention of people and makes you want more.
White?
Yeah.
I guess I figure I'm loud enough. I don't need one. Hi, I'm Wayne. This is like hi, I'm Wayne.
Hi, Wayne.
What is an AA? I'm a pulp writer. Yeah, thank you.
I'm a pulp writer, anyway. I grew up like most of these guys reading Doc Savage, and a couple of years ago I started writing stuff and wrote a tiny little book, and obviously I'm having fun.
Wayne cannot write a short book.
No,
All right,
there's a short one right there.
I'm gonna have to look at the credentials.
But-
Type is right there. It's a little fine.
But the problem is I can hold it in one hand, my next book, that won't happen. They tease me that I write books that stop doors.
I'm Frank Schildiner. I'm a martial arts instructor from New Jersey. I got it. Trying to get away from me. What he's doing. Long time friend. We've been messing with each other for what, 5 years now?
Yeah.
Something like that. I started writing Pulp Fiction thanks to Brian. I wrote him just to ask him a question or something about his. He does a great blog where he writes about things in his life, writing, everything, and I just wrote him to ask him a question. And we started to talk, and he offered me a chance to write Secret Agent X, and I've never looked back. That's where I'm talking
So you say, hi Ron, how you doing? Would you like to write a book?
Jim, please.
I'd like to blame everything on Ron also, if I could. Yeah.
Mea culpa, mea culpa, mea culpa.
My
Yeah,
dad and
yeah.
you. I'm a pulp writer too, thank God, and very proud to say so. In my private life, personal life, I work for the famous Tony Pacos in Toledo, Ohio. I'm a native of Toledo, Ohio. Very proud to say so. And
If you ever stop in and mention Jim's name, you'll get a discount on your entree.
no. Don't do that. I won't be working it. But my dad instilled my love of Pulp Fiction comic books and Pulp Fiction in me. He was a huge fan of it all in the day, the radio programs, comic books, pulps, everything like that. Never really thought about writing it myself until I met Ron online, and so very enamored of his Green Hornet work, and found out that he had a pulp publishing business, and here I am several books later.
Okay,
I'm happy to be here.
thank you. Okay, let's get into the subject matter and have fun with it as we can. Not heavy stuff or whatever. They've introduced themselves with unique background and stuff like that, and some of you talked about your inspiration of the old classic pulp, okay? Starting with you, Jim, going back this way, please. Okay, what I want to know, and what I'd like you to share with the audience here is, you mentioned, our connection, whatever, but when did the light bulb go on as to this is new pulp? This isn't the old stuff, this isn't reprinted, this is new pulp. And what was that appeal to you? Why did you want to write that?
It wasn't immediate because I started off with The Purple Scar was the first story that I wrote for Ron and to be published hopefully soon. My first story is still not published yet, but I actually set out to emulate as much as possible the original pulps. And it took me a little bit to realize that I could start to do some new things, still working in that same way of writing, that classic way of writing, but starting to adapt it to newer things. As much as Sergeant Janice is a brand new character of mine, he still is based upon the classic occult detective type of thing. I think it's really when I got to pretty much like something like Monster Earth, where a little bit more modern and giant monsters, but in the pulp style. And that's really, I think, when things really click with me, that we don't have to keep writing stuff that's set in the 30s or 40s, and we can, but that we can really adapt that stuff to anything. And that's really the fun of it for me now. It's like, wow, what could we do next?
Okay, good. Continue that. Again, I want you to, and Jim did a good job with it. I want you, Frank, again, your own personal experience of, we're talking about Pulp Fiction. You've seen the pulp conventions, you know what the pulps are and whatever. But when does that light bulb go on to you that says, this isn't the old pulp, this isn't my dad's pulp or my grandfather's pulp, this is new pulp? When did that dawn on you? What was your immediate thoughts and reactions?
That really came from Phil Cosey Farm. Philip Jose Farmer is the reason I started reading pulp. I didn't really know. The Shadow to me was a radio show. Doc Savage was weird covers you saw in the library and you never when you walked past. That's all I knew. I mean, I just didn't know anything about this. And then a friend of mine saw me reading the Mac Bolan's, which is really modern pulp as it was, and he said, you know, why don't you try the real stuff? And he handed me Doc Savage's Apocalyptic Life, and also Tarzan Alive. And I think I stayed up for 2 nights just reading those things, and I couldn't believe how different and amazing. It's all the things I love from serials and TV shows and radio shows. So I immediately ran out to find anything by Philip Jose Farmer, and I found Lord of the Trees and the Mad Goblin, his stories of the Nine, which were his version of Doc Savage and Tarzan in a modern setting in a pulp story. And it didn't occur to me that I could be one of those writers. I honestly was thinking more along the lines of my future, like Stephen King and that. But then you gave me the option of reading, by that time I was reading something, you gave me the option of writing Secret Agent X, who may be better to me than Doc Savage, who's smaller, but so fascinating that when you offered it to me, it was like, you know, that scene from the Blues Brothers with James Brown. I have seen the light, and I have not gone back since then. So that's really where it came from.
All right, thank you. Wayne, okay, when did you understand there was new pulp? And, you know, this is something you wanted to join.
Well, I'm writer and artist, so I was playing with Photoshop one day and took the original Doc Savage cover, the original Avenger cover, the original Captain America, the Golden Steel, and thought this would be neat to put them all in a poster, just goofing off. And I saw that and I said, this would be really neat if these guys were all in the same book together. Realizing I could never get the copyrights, I thought I ought to create my own little world and not bring it up to current date, but modernize them with the ideas of the things we know now. So kind of combining the old pulps and Marvel and DC and newspapers and movies that's been around since then. I said, what if I was a 1934 pulp writer and artist with the knowledge that we have today? How would I recreate these guys? And put them all in one big story.
I was kidding about Wayne not being able to write, you know, a short book. But let me, I really want to add this to it. If, you know, and hopefully after we leave here today, a lot of you are going to go upstairs and find these gentlemen at their tables, and please check their work out. It's exceptional, it's gifted, it's brilliant. All of them are great writers. Wayne literally sends me a book years ago that's like Gone with the Wind, right? And I'm like, nobody writes, you know, like 8,000 words pulp. You can't do that. You can't keep that pace up. You can't keep that narration up. You can't. Wrong. I read through that thing like wildfire. It's insane. It shows his passion and his love of what he does. All right? And to add to it, we go a couple years, and I really want to bring this up because I want people to find your table. He comes to Windy City 3 years ago, and he's got this huge bag with him, and he unfurls this ridiculous poster.
Which are free.
You just heard this. If you leave here without one of those posters, don't tell me you're a pulp lover or fan, all right? He meticulously does this poster of the history of American pulps and the hero characters and dates them. And they're little entries, and they're like hundreds of entries. It's
800.
I have this thing up on my wall at home. It drives me crazy. It's a fictional girl come to life. That's Wayne Reinagel work. Ralph, okay. Ralph's the newbie on the group, all right? Ralph joined this community a couple years ago, out of nowhere, and I have to add this, and he wouldn't do it himself because he's a great, humble man. Last year, or earlier this year, Ralph won an award from the New Pulp Writers. Best new writer in the field. That's right. Okay? Before Ralph go on, you knew this is something new that you want to focus on.
Well, I had always been a fan of the old folks. Conan's, Doc Savage, of course, a little bit of the Avenger, stuff in that genre. You know, and always had the interest of wanting to do something of my own. And I started writing something a little different. The first book in this series I started writing about 8 years ago. maybe more than that now. And I never finished it until they said that little injury with my back. I finally sat down and I finished the whole thing in 3 months. And that was my first getting my feet in the water. And like I said, they're action-packed. It's what pulp is. It's a lot of action. And I was like, wow, you know, I did that fast. I'm gonna do more. This is great.
Now, let me ask you, because I want to jump in here, okay? Because we may have some people in the audience who will get inspired by this and have the same thought, all right? At that particular time, when you finished this thing, you got it, how knowledgeable were you of the market? Did you have any thought that you could even get it published?
Well, I had previously written a how-to motorcycle book, an instructional book.
Okay.
All right, nonfiction. I wrote that and published it in 2005. And I did that through a company called Publish America.
Ah.
All right?
Sure.
So I had a little bit of knowledge.
Yeah.
Now, this I had a bad experience with. The book previous to this was called Redemption of the Sorcerer. All right? This is the sequel to that, in other words. And I went to Publish America with that, but it was the experience I had with them, with Help Them Roll Out to Get Me, the Motorcyclist Guide to Surviving the Everyday World, was actually a positive one. Okay? I went to them with Redemption of the Sorcerer, and it was a totally different story. I had a disaster. They didn't edit the book. They just took my manuscript and printed it. And, you know, I'm not an editor. I mean, I'm a writer. I mean, and it was raw. There was no, I didn't go over and correct it. They don't send it to us. We'll take care of it. He did nothing. They printed it as is. It was horrible. It was embarrassing. I had to buy the rights to go back from them.
Oh.
So this was like, now I took a step back. And what do I do here now? So I started investigating every option I had. And I said, let me try self-publishing at this point. I'll hire an editor myself, which is what I did. I hired an editor.
Cautionary tale, if you want to be a writer,
Yeah.
it's 2 different things. Get an editor, please, okay? If your work is the greatest thing since sliced bread, that's your opinion. Hire an editor. Please do us all a favor before we buy it and go, "Argh."
Even if you consider yourself an editor, have somebody else edit it.
Yeah.
Don't edit your own stuff.
And listen to this person or persons too.
Right.
Work with them.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, sometimes it means submerging some ego, knowing that the product is going to be better when you have.
Yeah, you have to take a step back and look at it, you know, seriously. He or she makes this suggestion, and you may not want to go with it. But take a look back. Is it going to make your book a better book?
That's the goal.
Yes,
Right. The best
absolutely.
stories you can write, that's the goal. And that if you have an editor, an experienced, talented editor, that's his or her goal as well. So when they give you a critique, listen to it, adapt it, work with them, all right? It's a blessing to have a good editor, okay?
Yes, it is.
And all of us can give experiences of how that's changed what we've done and made it just that much better.
Absolutely.
So, okay, all right. Again, I know your background, I know your love of pulse and whatever. And then you have a similar story to Ralph, i.e. you had a medical issue while you were doing Sunco. Why don't you?
Yes, sure. Well, back in 2003, I had a rupture of my LT3 disc, which crushed my spinal cord, and I'm still partially paralyzed and I've got some paresthesias. And I was laid up for several months. And while I was laid up, I came to discover there was a German folk character named Sun Ko that had never been translated into English. He was the German equivalent of Doc Savage, actually came into existence about a year after Doc Savage as a copycat. And I got interested in, reading the stories. Unfortunately, they're all in German, and I can barely read English as it is. So I decided, to heck with this, I'm going to write my own based on what I can get out of the German text, and it gave me something to do while I was in recovery. The Sunco character is, to me, was an opportunity to do my own take on Doc Savage, but a little different Doc Savage. A little darker, somebody with fewer moral limits to him, and it was very fascinating. I published a few short stories that we got together into a book, and it was well received by folks. In fact, I dare say I think I was the one that really introduced the character to
Very
the
much so.
new pulp writers.
Right.
And I had a whole bunch of them who said, "Oh, God, we want to use him as a villain." And they'd come to me and ask. And I said, "Yes, Sure, go ahead.
Look, I want to ask, because again, of all of you guys sitting here, I know that you were involved, like we said, with the podcast, the Book Cave. And I hope everybody here is familiar with that illustrious Book Cave. It's very much the voice of new pulp, all right? And I know when I first started discovering pulp fiction and this concept of doing it, you guys are already around. Rick and you were doing the show. You've done, what, 300 episodes?
We're coming up on number 300 now.
300 episodes. That's insane, all right? And I remember listening to the podcast, and it was really a helpful way to get familiar with the community and everything else like that. So just going back to that, when, working with Rick and whatever, when did you realize there was a new pulp thing happening, all right, that people were starting to do this stuff?
Well, as we would get new people to interview and new books were coming out, we noticed that there were people using classic characters but putting them into new situations. And in some cases, well, in most cases, updating some of the social stuff. Some of the overt racism and sexism kind of things were no longer there. There was a new sensibility. You also had more character development, and people started to wonder about the background of the character and where the character comes from. And that's something that is very modern. That is not something that the folk people would have done. Even like in Golden Age comics, a superhero would just appear without any origin and do stuff, because people just wanted the action. But modern readers really wanted more. They wanted some character development, and the stories, most of your classic pulp characters, the pulp stories, were relatively short. They were novella-length, really not novels.
Yeah.
And as a result, I was always amazed at how well people did it. Dead put Lester Dead or Doc Savage put so much into the short novellas, character development and everything. I never realized that they were that short. But as time goes on, I noticed more character development, new ideas coming in here, and more modern concerns. And I was there back in Pulp Park several years ago.
Yeah, right.
When we were sitting around there in the motel. We were
Yeah,
there.
oh, God, yes, yes.
And Tommy Hancock, and we were talking about this, and that's when we started to say, there's something going on here. It's a new pulp movement. It's not the old stuff.
Right.
We started to see new characters being created. We started to see, old characters being retreaded. What was happening is that a modern sensibility was being put into the old pulp mode.
Right.
With action, with heroic characters who were pretty heroic. There were always some noir characters in the pulps, but this was...
We were just talking, let me continue that. Pulp Arc was that convention, which was 4 years ago now?
Yeah.
That Tommy put together in Arkansas. Tommy had just started Pro Se Production. He jumped into the ring, okay? And so he invited a dozen of us, writers and editors, who were pouring this to come down here. And it was an amazing weekend. And the attendance was abysmal, to say the least. But none of us cared, because we got to meet our peers and our colleagues who were doing the same things that we were doing. And we sensed that we were on the verge of something new that was going to be tied to pulp. But our goal was to keep pulp alive. And that's why we were doing what we were doing. It was to keep that genre alive, that history of action adventure that comes out of the Great Depression, out of the 30s, all these classic writers, and to keep it alive for you and for future generations. That's an exciting concept. That's one we were all thrilled to be a part of. And we have fond memories of that beginning. I look at Windy City this year. We gave out the Pulp Factory Awards this year. Windy City is, I think, the fifth or sixth year in a row we give out the awards. And every January we look for nominations from the group. And we get nominees of short fiction, novellas, artwork, and novels. The first year we gave out the Pulp Awards, they were representative of 11 companies that did new pulp at that time. This year, all right, 6 years later, they were representative of 21 different companies. I'm not only talking about small guys like us or Pro Se or White Rocket, but the big New York companies as well, Titan Books, several other publishing firms that come into the field, targeting. Steampunk is getting involved with new pulp in a big way. And so like 21 publishers, we're getting, this thing is vibrant, it's alive, and it's doing what we want it to do. So now I'm going to go right back to our main topic, and I need you guys to dig deep to do this for me, because it is fun. Okay, I know from my own personal experiences that when I get lost in a Brother Bones or a Captain Hazard story or whatever, right, it's inexplicable how much fun it is to write this kind of material as opposed to other kinds of material. So go back, Jim, starting with you, all right, Sergeant Janice or Captain Action, all right, give us some sense of the joy you have in writing this as opposed to anything else you've done. And you've done textbooks on the Batman TV show, etc. But what's the fun of writing Pulp?
I actually thought about this in advance because I wanted to have a good answer, and it wasn't hard to come upon what it is. The most fun for me, because I got to tell you, writing actually comes sort of difficult to me sometimes. Sometimes it's like pulling teeth, but once I actually get going, and then it starts to get more fun. The real fun for me is the happy accidents. I know that you can pull all of us here, and we all have different methods of how we write. Our prep work, and if we even do prep work, and then the actual writing process. I actually do outline what I'm going to write. I want to know where I'm going to go, but I allow for some departures. It's those things that I stumble upon that are the big joy to me. Going along and then realizing that there's a tangent that I need to go on at this point, and it will make sense, or maybe it won't, but it's going to be a heck of a lot of fun. And then when that happens, it's a great joy to me, and especially when a character turns around and tells me what it wants to do. This has happened to me on almost every one of my projects, and I don't look for it. I don't, hope that will happen, but it does happen to me. And it's really something really kind of cool when that happens. It happened when I was writing the first Sergeant Janice book. A character and Sergeant Janice were going through a very tense situation. And suddenly the character that was with Sergeant Janice turned to me and said, I need to knock him over the head and get him out of here. And I was like, what? Literally, so that character, a policeman, took a club and clubbed my hero over the head and knocked him out and dragged him out of this very bad situation. I was like, I'd heard about this, that this happened to writers, but I never truly understood it, and now I actually do. That's the beauty and the joy.
Oh, the muse, tapping into creativity. I'll sit here and argue with any writer, any published writer who's going to tell me that's all planned out. Okay, that's the biggest BS in the world. If you are a real writer, it's not planned out. It happens magically. All right, and it's the pure adrenaline rush of what we do. Frank, give us an example.
With me, I write actually opposite to the way that Jim does. I actually always used to fight. I tried to outline so desperately until I read Stephen King's On Writing, and I found out he writes exactly the way I do. So one of the best-selling authors on earth does it, I think I can try. So I stuck with it. What I do, literally, is I have the characters, good and bad, I have the situation, and I have the background. I do some research like anybody should, and I just go. And if any time I've ever tried to outline, I never end up where I started. Never once. I always end up, the characters take me every direction, which is why sometimes my stories take turns. It's like, wow, where did that go? It's a really enjoyable experience, and because we're writing pulp, it's such a positive experience. I'm writing powerful, positive characters in this cynical world we live in. It's a real pleasure. So I have a good time every time I sit down before the computer, and I never know where the characters and the muse is going to take me. So that's my pleasure.
Right. It's fun doing this panel, and I'm really glad we picked this theme because, we can get together as writers, as creators, and the minute we start talking, it's like a shorthand because we've all experienced that rush. Getting in front of an audience of people who are not writers, sometimes they scratch their head and look at us and go, are these guys crazy? What are they talking about? It's writing. It's like, you're back in high school and you've been given an essay, and that's how boring and dull people think writing is. When you're writing this kind of material, that's just the opposite. The bounds are gone. The chains are removed. Wherever that creativity takes you is where you go. and it is a roller coaster ride. Wayne, you have any
Sometimes-
special moment in one of your books where surprise, surprise, I wasn't going there.
Sometimes it's just a single word. I had a character who is dealing with two other guys, he suddenly realizes, he says, "I'll take care of it, Father." And it completely changed, he's suddenly this character that you don't,
That's his father?
yeah, it's like, yeah, okay, that was interesting. One of the things I like is kind of like the Spinal Tap thing. You know, most amplifiers go up to 10, well, he's got one that goes up to 11. And the guy goes, "What's special about that?" He goes, "It's one above 10. That's what I do with my stories, kind of crank it up. And I always think of the King Kong movie. Peter Jackson says, if the original King Kong is fighting T-Rex, I want him to fight 3 T-Rexes. If he's fighting one airplane, I want 40 airplanes coming after him. Just push it up a little to a different level.
I really, again, because of how you write, and I'm constantly in awe that, like I said, you make that work, and I get that enthusiasm that comes across in your fiction. Ralph, you're getting more and more into this now, and like I said, the newbie on the table here, has that view struck you in a similar way? If you had those surprise moments?
Yes, I've had, this has happened to me on several of my books. I've had this, I don't really pre-plot. I usually have an ending and a beginning, and everything in between works on its own. But to me, the biggest, the thing that puts a smile on my face is when everything comes together and you don't see it happening. There's that one magic moment in the book where all these plot threads that you put in earlier all of a sudden converge, and it all makes sense. And you sit there and you say, wow, I didn't even see that coming. And that does happen.
Right, there's a thread that we're talking about here, and we do it enough and long enough that, again, I think most of the panelists would say you're all devoted readers, right, and have been all your life.
Right.
One of the things you do is you assimilate, all right, data and whatever, and you assimilate the narrative process. You assimilate plot development, motivation, character building, all right? But what happens with a writer is he consciously, or he or she consciously sits down to write a story. What happens is, though, the two wheels are going at the same time. That other wheel is the subconscious. It's that accumulation of everything that they've ever read, every concept of storytelling, so that you're banging away consciously at your story. But somehow the subconscious is throwing in subplots, connections that you're not aware of. Honestly, we don't make this stuff up until in that chapter, all of a sudden it comes together. And you go, where'd that come from? It's like words, it's balanced, and that's a great story. Does it happen all the time? Hell no. There are some stories that are like pulling teeth and don't happen, and you want it to. You keep working at the craft. But when it does, it's a piece of pure magic. It's the muse striking. So you have an experience, aha moment, like where'd that come from?
In doing the Sunco stories, I was making it up as I went along. And I did find, one of the things I find, like most of the guys over here, I don't do outlines. I have a general idea of where the story is going. But I enjoy being as surprised at what's happening as the people who read the story. And so I kind of enjoy letting the story go, let the characters interact, and ideas come in, and then something pops in out of nowhere that surprises me as much as it's going to surprise the reader. And that's the reason why I read some of these things, to see all the plot twists and to have the mystery revealed at the end. And what I can do is, because I'm a writer, I can cheat. And so I get down to the end and say, this is the thing I want. I can go back and write in a few things just to play fair. I've done that a couple of times. But yeah, I think that for me, the fun of it is actually being in there and seeing the story unfold and being as entertained by writing it as I'm hoping people are when they read it.
Cool. Okay, I'm going to continue with this because this is fun. And one of the things that happens when you do, especially what we do, all right, is that you really get to live out that dream project, all right, whether it's this comics or pulps or whatever. So starting with you are, Sunco, was that your dream project, or is there another one you're hoping to get to?
Well, actually, around the same time I was doing the Sun Coast stuff, I was also writing stories about, they're basically Doc Savage pastiches. They weren't really pastiches, they were actually Doc Savage stories using characters from the Doc Savage stories without using the names, so that I wasn't violating anybody's copyright. There was a magazine called the Zine of Bronze that published it for me. And I first got this, one crazy idea that I learned something about the rules of poker when you have wild cards. That I said, wow, that's interesting. I never heard it before. I could build a story around it. And so I turned it into a character study of Doc Savage and his aides, at the end of World War I, having their last fling together before they all go home. And this little peculiar thing becomes the linchpin in the end of the story. It's a little bit surprising. And that started me down. I wrote several pieces for the Zine of Bronze. And what I wanted to do, it was kind of frustrating because Lester Dent left a lot of open-ended stuff in the Doc Savage canon.
Right.
The story about how Monk and Ham had gotten around in France.
Right.
The story of Long Tom and the canon where he got the nickname. And so I decided, what the heck, I'm going to take a shot at it. And so I did stories based on both of those that were published in the Zine of Bronze. I then decided to go ahead, I was asked, Jimmy Marsh, who was the publisher, said, can you give me a Pat Savage story? And so he did. As it stands now, I've got these stories that have been published, but no, the Zine of Bronze is now gone. Now, what they allowed me to do was to actually interject into the stories ideas that I've had for many years, and help me to do a little bit of development on the characters. And I've got a couple of stories I want to do involving Remy and Johnny, and I have another Pat Savage story where she meets James Bond back in the day.
All right.
Yeah, so these are things that I want to do, and once I get that done, I think I've got enough for the book.
Wow, great, awesome. Okay, well, you're doing your own creator-owned stuff. Is that the dream? Do you want to continue doing your own creative stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Or is there a character of it that you like to get your hands on?
Well, there's always characters you want to get your hands on, too. Am I very happy doing my creative own stuff? Yes, absolutely. Because I'm a little bit of a control freak, first off. But I did a story for you. I did a Symbian story, which was a lot of fun. I mean, I had a great time doing that story.
Great story, too.
And I'm looking forward to seeing that. I can't wait. I know that's coming out soon.
Yes, it is.
And I can't wait to see that book. That was a lot of fun, working on a well-known character and putting my spin on it. Sure, you always want to work on something. James Bond, he mentions. Doc Savage, everybody and their brother wants to work on Doc Savage. I wrote a character called Torog, who was a warrior, basically a barbaric character. I did that for Tommy about a year and a half ago. It was Conan-esque, let me put it that way. It wasn't Conan the Barbarian. Same kind of world, though. A lot of action, adventure, monsters, demons, magic. That was probably my favorite piece to write, that one. I just felt very at home right now. It was great.
Wayne, I know you have touched like every single pulp character that ever lived in your fiction. What's the one you like working with the best?
Doc Titan's pretty cool, but I like doing his cousin too. And
Yeah.
she's got some great adventures, and kind of fun doing the other side. I never knew how to be a writer, so I would always play at it. I wrote screenplays for different things that never left my room. So I did all kinds of Nick Fury comic book plots, and because I always liked Nick Fury, and things like Warlord by Mike Grell, and the whole series.
Right.
And now that I'm actually writing my own books, I can take parts of the Warlord stuff and stick it in a pan pipe and do it. Change the character, and it seems to work very well.
It's like the cook changing the recipe a little bit, right?
It's kind of alter a little bit instead of making biscuits and pancakes.
Yeah, right.
Fine. So I'm not losing anything. I'm taking all my old thoughts and moving them over.
And trust me, it's always an event when Wayne releases a new book, okay? I mean, because like, again, we know the scope of what he writes, all right? And the books are phenomenal. Frank, I mean, you know, we've recently, me, you, and Jim, have recently been in an anthology that, for me, was a dream come true. Pride of the Mohicans.
Yeah, that one, I mean, I just didn't even imagine. This is, for those of you who don't know, we got to write the characters from Last of the Mohicans. Hawkeye and the others, and we wrote 3 very different stories, and it was 3 really, it was just an amazing book. My mother reads my stuff, and usually she says it's good, I liked it. This she actually raved about, because she doesn't like art, but this was basic literature to her, so it was like, wow, this was amazing. I want to read these kind of stories from you. It's like, well, no, you're not going to. Because this is a one-shot. If it comes down to, I get to live my dream every time I get to sit in front of the computer. And any character I'm writing, I'm getting to get something out of it. I write Thunder Jim Wade now, who's a Doc Savage. That's as close as I ever want to get, as long as Will Murray's on the earth. I don't want to go near Doc Savage while he's around, because I know I can do it as well, or as right. If I had to choose any character in the world I want to write, I guess Operator 5 would probably be the ultimate to me. You know, I like those secondary characters. I've written the Avengers, so I guess I'm a Kenny Robeson, so I don't have to go any further with that.
Yeah, hey, look, I wanted to throw in, and I'll let Jim finish off, you know, the spread. But that story of Pride of the Mohicans really happened like 2 years ago, when our mutual writing colleague, Van Plexico, basically gets online and says, you know, one of my all-time favorite movies is Michael Mann's Last of the Mohicans with Daniel Day-Lewis. Well, I mean, that is my all-time favorite American classic by James Fenimore Cooper. I discovered it in high school. It's always been my favorite. I've seen every movie version of it, whatever. And so here's Van going, you know, I'm looking to do an anthology. I want 4 writers, write 15,000-word stories that take Chingachgook, Uncas, and Hawkeye in adventures that all have to be prequels before the movie, the episodes in the book. And I went ballistic. And I got a hold of a band and I said, I'm in, okay? I am totally, nobody, I'm in. So I was the first guy to sign on. And then our British colleague, Ian Watson, jumped in and did a story in like 3 days, because that's what Ian does, and drives us all batty, all right? And so I'm slaving away. I think it took me like 3 or 4 months and I had my story done. In the meantime, Jim signed on. So Jim had signed on, so okay, we've got 3 guys, we need 1 more, and I don't remember who the writer was, but Van did recruit a 4th writer. Hot dog, all right? So last year at this show, PulpFest, the 3 of us, myself, Rob Davis, my partner, and Van are coming to the show together. We're driving up together. And somewhere in the trip, I says to Van, I said, so how's Pride of the Mohicans coming? You know, we ready to get this out of the market? And Van goes, no, so-and-so dropped out. I said, excuse me? He said, I'm back to 3 writers. I don't have a 4th. All right, so my next, obviously logical thing is, why don't you write it? I mean, Van is a gifted, talented writer. And you're going to love this, because, again, it's the quirk of what we do. I can't write that. Now, what do you mean you can't write that? That's not my voice. I do science fiction. I can't do that. I said, but no. I love those characters. That's why I want you guys to write them. I want you guys to write new stories, but I can't write them. And that's not an unusual thing. We all have our strengths and weaknesses that we recognize. Airship 27 publishes tons of Sherlock Holmes stories. All right? Classical. Conan Doyle Sherlock Holmes stories. I'm the editor. I love getting the submissions and reading them. People have come to me and said, why don't you write one? Because I can't. I cannot do Watson's voice. I'm not ever going to try. But other people can. Thank God they can. So this story, so now I'm really disappointed. Van's got 3 stories. He's not going to write it. We're not going to get the book out for maybe another year or so. We come to the show. We're all doing our thing. And Frank walks up to me during the show last year, right here, a year ago, and we're talking, and all of a sudden I went, hey, Frank. And he looks at me. I said, you like that Michael Mann Last of the Mohicans movie? Oh, yeah, I love that movie. Those characters are great. I said, you think you could write one of those? And he hadn't seen Van's posting or whatever. He goes, oh boy, would I love that. I grab him by the cuff, come with me, and I drag him over the table. I said, writer number 4.
The man said, you'll take it? And I said, yes, absolutely, please.
So
sign it."
Frank goes home and literally, we communicated a little bit. He asked to see my story. He wanted to feel what we're doing. I sent him my story. And I think he did, what, 2 weeks maybe?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. He finished
blew it
the
out.
story. The volume was done. By the end of the year, Van had published it. And all of us are like beside ourselves because, and again, like I said, it's so out of the normal Avenger, hero, blah, blah, blah. It's an American classic. All right, it's by things that are taught in school, whatever. But we 4 writers got to play in that playground and writing those characters. I, honest to God, was such a joy. I was in a rush. I mean, I literally time traveled back to pre-colonial America when I was writing. I was lost in those woods. I was sharing those adventures. Things were coming out on my computer screen that I didn't even know were in me at all. And by the time I finished it, it was one of the coolest experiences I've ever had as a writer. So, hey, pick up on that or your own experiences, Jim, please.
Yeah, just really quick. If you had told me 10, 15 years ago that I'd be writing a story based on Last of the Mohicans, but again, like Ron said, it came out of me from somewhere. I love the movie, have never read the book. Sorry.
Okay.
I actually got the book from the library before I sat down and wrote my story and kind of paged through it, because I wanted to see Cooper's dialogue and the way he spoke.
But don't worry, it's not written like that.
Right.
As much as I love the classic, oh God, was that English stilted? Believe me, all right. And so we got different sensibilities in time, all right.
I love creating my own characters, and I want to keep doing that. But I might be odd in the sense of, there's a lot of licensed, properties owned by other companies and other people that I would absolutely love to do. And I tend to, focus on that even more. My dream project would be to write a Batman 66 pulp novel. Literally. I actually asked around a little bit about that, but that's like my, pie in the sky. Kindle Worlds. You know what Kindle Worlds is now? That there's licensed properties that you can basically write fan fiction and get, possibly paid for it. They opened up a property. I'm not going to go into it because I think I'm going to jinx it for myself if I do. But there's one property that they have opened up for that is a path to another one of my dream projects, and I'm still going to do that. But like Batman is that big, sexy character that I'd love to write. But what I would say to anybody is be open to things like this that might come your way. Maybe not as splashy as Batman, but just as wonderful. Once you start to get into it, and you may just find a whole avenue of fun in writing.
This is a fun playground.
It is. Oh, it is probably that. If it wasn't, these guys wouldn't be sitting up here today. We wouldn't be having these discussions. Okay. At the bottom line, nobody here is getting rich. All right. We're not going to appear on 60 Minutes next week and to make the New York Times bestseller list. That's never going to happen to any of us. Okay. I would love it to happen. Sorry, Wayne. But the short one maybe. I don't know what the long. All right. Hey. But
7-hour movie.
But it's not why we do this. It's not why we do this. Okay, we do this because we love doing it. We love the subject matter. We love what we write, and we love being here with you people and talking about it. And we can't do it without you. Okay, I'm sitting there today, 9 years later, with a catalog of 94 titles. All right, Rob Davis and I, 94 titles in 9 years. That's crazy. That's insane. That could have never happened without all the people that come to Windy City, that come to PulpFest, that buy our books online, onto the internet or whatever. We're obviously touching the market. We're obviously touching that dream in all of you, that kind of fiction that you want to have that comes from pulp. And thank you for that. Thank you for supporting us always. All right. Again, without you guys, this doesn't happen. pretty much gonna end it here because we've got 10 minutes. If anybody's got any kind of questions for any of our writers about the process of what we do, please, this is the time we're gonna devote to that. And then before we wrap up, I'll let you guys promote a little bit what they've got here and what they're selling. So if anybody has any, yes, Rick?
Yeah, just to clarify with Art, when you're writing these Doc Savage pastiches, you're not using the copyrighted names.
Nope. I avoided like the plague. But I did actually do something a little clever in the Monk and Ham story, where, Monk is always a cop and always doing things and getting in trouble, and Ham is always pompous. And so I had, in the one part of the story, the commanding officer in the Foreign Legion says to them, you, Andrew, you've got to live like a monk from now on. And you, and you, Ted, you got to stop handing it up.
Okay, I've been around with that. Yes.
So how strict is that? Because clearly there are repetitive names of characters used here and there, and they get through and they are published. For instance, Ralph, yesterday you were reading, and you had a character named Starbolt.
Right.
He's one of the Imperial Shi'ar Guard.
Yeah, but...
So I'm wondering, I mean, that doesn't matter to me, but how do you get past that? That doesn't matter. Who would ever notice?
It's a minor character
Yeah.
that's Marvel created. It's not something that I don't think anybody's ever going to catch that, beyond you.
No, they're making a whole movie out of that. Guardians of the Galaxy did so well.
Actually, there's not
the Shi'ar Guard.
Actually, there's not a bad chance that they would include the Shi'ar Imperial Guard in a future Cosmic Marvel movie.
like
But
you said-
I'm not saying that you could get. I'm saying how strict is that for anybody with characters borrowing names at all? Because obviously there was more than one Captain Marvel.
Right.
But that's a major one, right?
Yeah, but
So-
then that's stretching back between two huge companies, and they fought each other over it for years.
Right.
Okay. As far as Doc Savage, I mean, you can't use Doc Savage's name. Everybody knows who he is and his men. I mean, you might as well just walk on a bed of hot coals.
Right.
It's obvious you can't use that name, no matter what you say. That's why he uses Doc Titan.
But there have been so many pastiches that
Yes.
you can pretty much just use a different name.
And there's also a lot of them in the public domain that you can use. I mean, Jim Anthony, you published, Ron
Captain
publishes
Ashley.
Jim Anthony,
Yeah.
I did Thunder Jim Wade.
Right.
There are ways around it, and there are some character names that are so general you can use them because it's not the same one. A lot of characters' names out of Robert E. Howard are just based on ancient gods and ancient situations. You can pick and choose. Obviously, if you use the stuff that the Howard properties are going to protect, you're in trouble. But otherwise, you can just pick and choose where it is. Every writer does that because there's nothing original really out there. We've lived too many years in this world.
But if you're trying to evoke a certain character, you're saying it's easy enough to kind of say a name that is obviously a pledge back towards something else, and people might pick up on that. But they're not going to complain
In my
about it.
one book, I mentioned Solomon Kane. He's not a character. It mentions, Solomon Kane found this cane in Africa, part of the staff. And I figured I'm not really violating anything. It's just telling you. And someone reads it, they go, oh, well, that's that character. They'll go read his books. But I figured I'm not really violating anything by using that name.
I think there are two issues here. One is fair use. There is some ability to use copyrighted names in that in articles in the news or in reporting. And you can sometimes make the case that I'm just mentioning a character and passing away. I mentioned Winston Churchill. So the fair use law, I'm not familiar with the exact details, but that's one way of getting around it. And there's the second thing, which is that sometimes the guys who own the character should realize every now and then having their character mentioned somewhere is not necessarily a bad thing. There's an old saying that no publicity is bad publicity, and by doing it, you can actually be helping to keep that character alive.
Right.
So, those are things that I think that can kind of make things a little lax and allow you to use some of these terms.
Right. Hey, look, the time's running out here, and I really don't want to get into an offshoot of copyright or this or that.
Yeah.
Okay, this has been a fun panel. So what I'm going to do is let each of you have a few minutes to promote what you're doing here, what you have coming out, and then if Mike hasn't come, we'll open up for another question. Jim, what do you got on your table right now?
Literally or figuratively?
What do you have here?
Oh, okay. Well, let's see, about half of the Airship 27 table has stuff with me in it. There's the new Captain Action book. This is the first one, Little of the Glowing Man, but Hearts of the Rising Sun is brand new.
We have one copy
One
left,
copy.
people, all right?
Yes.
Sequel, Captain Action 2, we have one copy left at the table, if anybody's interested.
Sergeant Janice Returns is also.
We have that here,
for
right?
this year. And following this, I'm going to be doing reading, and I hope that you all stick around for that. We're going to have a good time. And I'm actually going to read from Sergeant Janice Returns, the brand new Betrayal on Monster Earth and Pride of the Mohicans. I'm very, very proud of that. But yeah, we can talk a little bit more about my work in the next hour. Again, please stick around and we'll have a good look at it.
Frank?
I had brought 10 copies of Thunder Jim Wade, my latest book, out. It's entirely going off the media.
That's all right.
Really proud of that. It was my first solo project too, so I'm really genuinely touched by how many people love this. The books that I do have available right now are on the Airship table. This is Ravenwood, the Stepson of Mystery, which Art knows I wrote Sunco, and I wrote him exactly opposite to the way that Art wrote him. Art and I have been friends for a long time, and we've had some really fun discussions on that character. And the character I tend to write for Ron the most is Secret Agent X. And they do have copies of the second one that I wrote in volume 4. And I got the cover on the 2 that I wrote. I'm really proud of that. This is called The Crown of the Cobra. And it was a genuine pleasure to read and write it, really.
Right, and we're in the process of putting together Secret Agent, Volume 5, if anybody's interested.
And working on that right now, too.
Story for us. Okay, Mike, what do you got going?
Everything I've got is tied to the Infinite Horizons universe. All the books are kind of interlinked. Those are the 2 Pulp Heroes books. I'm 9/10 of the way through the 3rd novel, so hopefully it's fall I have it. All these other books are tied together in one way or another. And I also have a ton of postcards and posters on my table if you want some free stuff.
That Pulp History poster I told you about is free. Please stop and pick one up. You are going to be so happy you did. Ralph, what do you got going?
These are my 3 most recent releases, all within the past few months. My Enemy Myself, the sequel to Redemption of the Sorcerer. Cagliostro Chronicles 2, sci-fi novel, is the sequel to the first books. Both are up on my table. Hyperforce, superhero novel, superhero prose novel that the gentleman mentioned before. I also have other books out there. I have the first books in both these series are up on my desk, and that's about everything I have with me. Every book is different types of adventures from one another.
And please understand, this is Ralph's first year at the con with table and his books. Please, visit him, talk to him. He's a great writer. And this is just the beginning of a wonderful career.
Thank you.
All right, what do you got going?
Well, I'm trying to finish my Sunco novel, Quest of the Secret Masters, which I'm 2/3 of the way through, and hopefully I'm going to get it done this year. I have an essay in the 4th volume in the World of Philip was a Farmer, which is an analysis of Warmth and Rust, which was the sequel to The Lovers.
That's available at Media House table upstairs.
That's correct. That's
Okay.
available here. And I've mentioned that I've got these other stories that are brewing around there, and eventually I got 3 more stories I got to finish, and once I have them, I think I've got enough for a book.
Awesome. Thank you all very much. Thank you to our panel.